Learning how to program can be challenging, but at the same time, very interesting. Today, we're going to talk to students at 42 School about how they are learning software engineering. We also gonna have discussion with software developer at Google to talk about his experience. This is an Inspire the Next project. Stay tuned. We will talk about robotics at 42, how to learn to code, and what the future looks like in the world of computer science and information technology.
I never was able to get a diploma. Basically, I was studying in Azerbaijan before coding on physics major for 2 years. We won a green card and I decided to just move on here and see what I can do without it. So I came and I found a job as a physics teacher, but without any kind of bachelor degree or anything. It is definitely doable as long as you have the knowledge and you can prove that you actually can do something, because this is what actually matters, not the diploma. And with the coding, I have been interviewing a lot with different companies. Not a single one even asked me about my education completely. Every time when they start talking about this, they were almost interested in what languages I knew, what I have done, what projects I have accomplished, and everything else. So I just talked about the school. No one ever asked me about my bachelor, master's, or whatever kind of formal certificates.
Yeah, of course. I think it's more or less a known fact that, especially when you're applying like technical companies, they don't require any 4 years college education. So even when you're reading the job description, it says you have to have a 4 years description, or there's always an or, which says sufficient experience in this field. That's up to you guys, I think, to decide. Sometimes they put the year, hey, you have at least like 3 years or 4 years of work experience in this field, but I don't think that's a hard constraint to get into IT. So 4 years education is not required, but it's desired. It makes things easier, that's all.
One of the things that motivates me is that, I think about like all the programs that I use on a regular basis. Like anything from like a basic app that like I just use for entertainment, or something that like I use for my job. The idea that like something I can create, even as just like kind of like on my own time, could be used by potentially millions of people, that's crazy to me. That's crazy to me that like something I can create can be used by millions of people, and it can like potentially like affect the lives of millions of people. And kind of like seeing technology, how it's being used to make people's lives better, that's something that I'm also really passionate about. Like seeing like especially like the medical field, or just like general life organization. Things like that I think are really impressive with technology, and like the influence you can have on the world. So I think like influence and actually like, your work actually mattering are what is actually what keeps me motivated.
Most of the job is very routine. Most of the job is already solved. It's just something that needs to be done. Basically, when you, let's say from business perspective, what they're doing is they're having a problem that they want to solve. And then they ask a bunch of engineers, so this is a problem that we have, we need to make sure that people are gonna use, let's say, application to make something easier. So first batch, those people, they will think about architecture, they will build an architecture, and then they will think about main workflows, like what's supposed to happen. And in most projects, in most cases, there's no math involved at all. I feel the math are going to be involved when you're trying to do something on the edge of science, when you try to, launch a rocket. You will need a lot of math there, that's for sure, because every single mistakes are going to be costly. And in real life, let's say, programming and job generally, math is not that needed, to be honest. You don't do any kind of like calculations there. The only thing you're doing, you're operating on data. It's like you're taking data from one place, you're parsing it out in a format that you want to use by yourself, so it will be like useful either for others or for you to make shorter code and all those things. and then you just operate on data. You add something to data that you took from some other place, you subtract it, you change it, you renamed it, and you push it back.
For what I do, no, honestly. Some of the math I do, like it's very basic, like multiplication, division type stuff. Nothing too complex. Most of what I deal with is like logic based as opposed to math based. That being said, though, there's definitely fields in programming that are very math heavy. But what I personally do, no.
Technical skills are of course very important, as well as I would accentuate on this that culture fit, in terms like I've recently went through a bunch of interviews. It feels like on the same level as technical skills, culture fit is very important for companies. I'm not sure how it works among startups, but among established companies, they require, of course, coding. You have to be able to solve problems, set problems during the interview. It's one of the steps where you have to solve some algorithmic questions, problems. That's one of the things. Second thing is every interview I've been through, and I've been talking to other my friends. They also say there's a culture fit section of the interview where which plays a lot of role in getting the job.
I think something that's really important for problem solving is having patience for the problem, because one of the things that a lot of new developers do is that they're given a problem and they're like, okay, I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm just going to start coding and I'm just going to pray that whatever I throw at the problem, it might work. And that's a really bad practice. The thing about one of the things I think they were looking for when I was getting interviewed was how patient I was when given a problem and solving it, and also taking the time to think about any kind of edge case that might happen with the problem. If I was given a number problem, I might think okay, well, could I receive negative numbers? Could I receive a number that's bigger than what the program might allow? Things like that. And also just trying to think of every single kind of thing that I am and am not allowed to do with the problem. That's a really good practice to have. So I think they look for patience and just overall being calm when going through a problem as well. Because that's another thing I've known, is that a lot of times I'll see really smart developers get interviews and they end up they might actually, they could be way better coders than me, but the problem is they'll be in an interview and they'll be stressing the whole time. And that's another thing you need to, I think we need to work on, is being able to, calmly go about, solving problems. Because, no one wants to work with a guy that's freaking out all the time, everyone, because the reality is you're going to have problems that you're not going to be able to solve, and you might even have to ask for help on. And if you can't do it calmly and you can't do it with patience, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot.
It's all about mindset, at least from my perspective. When you are learning how to code, you don't memorize syntax. Really, you can forget a bunch of functions, it's totally fine. You can look up it in the internet at any point in time. The thing is, it's all about the way how you think. It's all about how you approach the problems, how you start, what questions you ask yourselves, how fast you can find the answers.
So the problem with trying to think about, when have I actually learned enough to get a job, is that the problem with that question is that, there's so much to learn in this field that it could very easily, you never really will feel like you learn enough. I would say the best course of action would be to just try to, instead of focusing on learning a million languages or learning a million algorithms, mostly focus on, your problem solving skills. Those are the things you should really be focusing on. If you see a technical problem, how do you approach it? Or more importantly, with how you explain stuff. Because as someone who used to be a teacher for Code for Fun, my job was to teach sixth graders or even first graders very complex coding problems. And my logic is, if you can explain it to a kid, then you fully understand it. So I would definitely say try to focus on those two things as opposed to really worrying about learning a million languages, because if you can break down problems and you can explain them in a way that even like a kid can understand, then you can take those two skills and apply them to any kind of language that your job might require you to work on.
That I found easy to answer. The reason is there are like ton of programming challenge sites, algorithm question sites. Like one of my favorite is LeetCode and HackerRank. And they also have sorted the questions or labeled the questions in a certain level, level 1, level 2, medium or easy, hard level questions. So I say, depending on what company you want to go to, you should always have like top 3 companies you want to work for eventually. Not 1, not 2, 3. Always get 3 as a backup, okay? Depending on that companies, where they stand, try to solve those questions. If you feel like you're solving, let's say in my case, a lot of medium questions I was able to solve, and plus a couple of hard questions from time to time. If you can solve that, if you feel like you're doing great in that, give it a time constraint. Of course, there should be a time constraint, because when in the interview they always have from 45 minutes to 1 hour duration. If you can solve those problems, and if you feel like you're doing it constantly, then go for it.
Stop thinking that you're stupid. Stop thinking that you can't do it. Start thinking about the problem and nothing else. Start solving the problem and nothing else. Because most people, what they're doing, at least what I notice, is like they start looking on a problem and then they start thinking about, oh my god, this is so hard. Oh my god, I have no idea how to code. Oh my god, what I should write? Is it a dot? Is it a semicolon? Is it a comma? Is it what? They start focusing on the syntax itself without understanding the algorithm or the logic behind it. This is what they need to just get rid of. Every time when they will get these thoughts, put it aside, put it in a box, and start doing this stuff. Because this is what actually matters. And once you will finish 1 project, 2 projects, 3 projects, maybe after 15 projects, you will still even have this feeling that you still have no idea what to do, but you have results to show. And this is the moment when you just start realizing, these feelings will never actually go away, because programming is something that's gonna evolve, and it evolves very, very fast. So fast that new technologies are coming up every 6 months, 7 months or something. And it's like, most of them can be completely different from what have been. If you will look on, for example, web development for the past 10 years, it has come up so much dramatic changes. 10 years ago, we were doing things completely different, and now we have to relearn. So it's always going to be this feeling that you don't know something, and it's always going to be this. Once you get used to it and stop thinking about that you don't know something and start doing it in action, you will just get used to it, It's kind of hard to explain, actually.
Yeah. A couple of years before, I thought like anyone can do IT, anyone can, if they try hard, can make it happen. But pushing a couple of my own, friends and acquaintances, I figured that not everyone has the patience enough to learn. Not just IT, they just don't have enough, patience to acquire a lot of information. IT, if you're going to IT, it's expected that there are a lot of information which you need to digest and be able to use that information. And it's not only IT, if you're going if you're be a writer, right? The same thing. You have to consume a lot of information in order to be able to produce. So that level, people seem to be, when they see a lot of code or a lot of challenge, they say, hey, it's too hard. I mean, of course it's hard, it seems hard, but if you put enough effort, if you are really passionate about it, then you can overcome it. Don't be scared just seeing the code, hey, it's too much. It requires time, it requires, consistency. You have to be consistent in your effort. If you're reading 1 page of a technical article today, make sure you are doing it tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, every day. It has to be consistent effort all the time.
Yeah, all the time. Sometimes it was wild to me, especially my first couple of weeks within working at Samsung, and working, I was like, oh man, I'm not, am I really keeping up? Am I really that good of a programmer? And my girlfriend would look at me and like, Jamie, you work for Samsung, calm down. So yeah, that it's very, very easy to get imposter syndrome in this field, because the reality is, anyone with an internet connection can be your competition. And that's a really intense thought to have when you realize, like, if this person has internet connection and they can access resources to learn, they could easily do what you're doing, get a job and, work on the field. But it just kind of depends on, like, how hard are you willing to work at what you're wanting to do, and how well do you sell yourself? I think those are two things that, like, those are things you should be focusing on for this kind of role. But as far as imposter syndrome goes, it's definitely died down a lot. But a lot of times, like, especially here at 42, like, when I first got in here, I was working alongside people who had degrees in computer science and have been doing coding in this language for years. Whereas for me, like, when I came into the school, I had never really even touched the C programming language. So it was pretty common for me to be like, oh man, am I really keeping up? But really, it's just a matter of, like, you're not the smartest person in the room, and that's okay, because you never really want to be the smartest person in the room. You always want to be around people who push you to do better. And if you try to focus on, like, hey, instead of thinking, am I the best person in the room, or am I, like, good enough, think, what can I do to make myself better so that I can, like, keep up with people that I admire. I think that's a better mentality to have.
Let's say I have no experience whatsoever, right? I guess this is different because there are some people who really need to see the results once they wrote some piece of code. For those type of people, I guess front end is going to be the best place to start because they can play around it, they can keep themselves motivated, they can enjoy more what they're actually doing fast. And there's another type of people who wants everything just to work. Those are like a backend people, Those who don't care how it looks. For those people, like backend. If you can't decide which one to do, I guess the best way for you would be to actually go a little bit both. Like, take a project, like make an application, make a website. All of those things require your everything, right? So you take an idea what you need to do, and then you start searching what you can find in the web. I found that the best tools are those who are very wide supported by communities, because there is going to be a lot of tutorials, and if you couldn't find the answer for your question in one tutorial, most likely you're going to find it in another one. It's way harder to do when there is not enough information on the internet or somewhere else. In these cases, you just start like panicking and asking every single person you know, and then asking them to ask every single person they know, and you just research. Research is the most of the time of development.
Well, I can only kind of talk about my personal experience because the problem is, like I said, there are so many fields within this. Is that, maybe you're really passionate about, like, web design. There's definitely, like, there are basic paths you can do for that. Or maybe you're more interested in, like, systems, and there's also, paths for that. For me, when I got into programming, what I really enjoyed about web design was that, just with like a few steps, I could already have something like visual on my screen pretty instantaneously, and that sort of like instant gratification was, I actually really enjoyed that aspect of it. It made me want to like program more. So I realized, all right, I want to build entire websites that can even have like a database connected to them so people can like register on it, and not just like, very basic web page type stuff. So I started off basically with like, HTML and CSS. Once I started feeling comfortable with that, I started moving on to JavaScript, to kind of help the HTML and CSS look better and have more functionality. And from there, I realized, okay, I'm going to need to really step up to make this better. So I decided to look into the MERN stack, which is, pretty much with the MERN stack, you can have like an entire functioning website. People can register, you can have the database so you can like store the information. Being able to complete that type of stuff, that was a lot of fun for me. And it overall made the process of learning like an actual fun experience. So I would say, really try to look at all the opportunities that programming has. Because it's not just web design. I mean, there are so many things. I mean, you got the AR, VR, machine learning, if you really want to get, have a pretty, extreme experience like learning. Really try to think, what do you want to do? Like, what is something you would actually be passionate about?
Specifically for Kyrgyzstan, if you're talking about, we do have enough materials in Russian. That's how I started learning. But the main thing I would say again, consistency. Don't never give up. If this is something you really want to do, and if you have the patience and the desire enough, you will get there. There's no stopping. There's nothing between you and to the point where I want to get. Just keep enough work, and you will get there.